Hey, how you doing, everyone? It's a pleasure. Um, you know, Obviously due to extreme circumstances, we couldn't all get together and just break bread at the actual event in Texas for South by Southwest. But hey, this is where we're at right now. Hopefully, you could enjoy this presentation, and it's my honor and my pleasure to be able to, create this video and at least just share some facts and get down to the nitty gritty with you. My name is Jonathan Cabrera, right? I'm a professor in criminal justice. I teach over at CUNY, at Rutgers, and I also teach at Hudson Community College in Jersey. Um, just a little bit of my background. So I went to a small state university for my undergrad. It literally was a 1 block radius. It was in Jersey City, New Jersey. I'm originally from Queens, New York. I lived in Queens for the first half of my life, up to like 13 years of age. And then I moved to Jersey City and I did high school. I did my undergrad there. And then for my graduate degree, I got my master's in public administration. I went to NYU for my master's. Now, prior to me working as a professor, which is what I'm doing currently, I was working in correctional facilities and I was working with organizations dealing with the communities that are quote unquote at risk and stuff like that. Straight out of undergrad, I started working at a halfway house in Paterson, New Jersey. If anybody knows who Fetty Wap is, baby, won't you come my way, right? Like, he's from Paterson, New Jersey. Victor Cruz, who used to play for the New York Giants, is from Paterson, New Jersey. And Paterson had an over 30% poverty rate. So, it has, its grittiness and its roughness to it. So I work with this population in Paterson. They were on parole, probation. I was a case manager. I did that for a year and a half, basically assisting individuals who just came home or who were on probation as an alternative to incarceration to basically seek education or some form of employment in order for them to, be able to do quote unquote pro-social activities, aka just stay out of trouble, right? So I did that for a year and a half. I really enjoyed it. And the just the intensity of what comes with the work is definitely something that, we could spend hours and hours just talking about it, but I'll touch on different things throughout the presentation. Then after that, after I worked at Paterson, New Jersey, I ended up transitioning to the New York City Department of Corrections. So literally they have different facilities, but the first facility that I got placed in to work, and I was a program coordinator at the time, basically helping provide reentry services to individuals who were currently on the island in the event that they came back to the community. Because even though Rikers Island has this reputation of, being one of the most notorious facilities in the world, it's still a jail. So it's a holding facility. You still haven't been sentenced. You're still awaiting trial. You're still awaiting for them to come up with the conclusion as to what's going to end up happening with you. So a lot of the individuals that were in our program, they wouldn't necessarily know if by the time that they get their certifications, whether it be OSHA, food handlers, electrical, plumbing, if they were going to be sent upstate or if they were able to go back into the community. And so I did that kind of work for a year with the Department of Corrections. I worked on the largest facility in Rikers Island. Rikers had, at the time, 10 plus facilities. And I worked on the largest one, which was about 40 acres. It was half general population. It was half mental observation, which meant the individuals in there dealt with some form of mental health, illness. Then after I spent about 6 months working on the island, I ended up working in 3 borough facilities, one in Brooklyn, one in the Bronx, and the other one in Manhattan, in downtown. They call the one in Manhattan the Tombs. So it kind of just tells you, like, just the environment. If you're able to call a facility the Tombs, it's probably not the best facility, right? But, most of the violence that I knew about happening in the facilities happened, for example, in the Brooklyn facility. Slashings and lockdowns were pretty frequent there. Pretty much almost every day when I went to the facility, lockdowns were happening pretty much for like the whole day. So I'm gonna get into all these different things, but I'm just kind of giving you a background as to who I am. I'm first generation. My father's from the Dominican Republic. He's from the camps and farms of the DR, and then came over to the United States. My mother, she's from Ecuador. Grew up in a single parent home, and then they came over here. So I'm first generation, you know, U.S. citizen. Then I'm also the first in my household to go to college and to complete college. I'm the first male, you know, in my whole family to go to college and get my college education, my bachelor's degree. I'm the first in my family to get a master's degree, period. So, like, you know, I'm speaking from an academic standpoint, but a lot of what I'm saying, too, is going to come from direct and personal experience because having grown up in the inner cities of New York and New Jersey, I was exposed to different things. I was exposed to gangs. I was exposed to drugs. I was exposed to violence and all types of stuff. And so when I speak as to the school to prison, when I speak directly to the school to prison pipeline, yeah, I'm going to pull up some statistics and some, you know, some factual things for us to consider. But I'm also going to be speaking from personal perspective because, to be honest, my story, I still, to this day, I'm just like, man, sometimes it really is better to be lucky than intelligent, you know, because it just ended up working out for me. Statistically, I'm not even supposed to be here. You know what I'm saying? Like the high school graduation rate for when I applied for graduate school, at least in Jersey City at the time, was just a little over 60%. You know, just a high school graduation rate. So it tells you not a lot of people are even thinking about college even after that. So without any further ado, I'm going to share the screen with you. I'm going to get into the presentation. And pardon any background sounds, I'm outside right now. I figured I might as well kind of do the video in like a little cozy scenario and, you know, set up the vibes and all that good stuff. So the presentation is called Rikers to Rutgers, Ending School to Prison Pipelines, presented by myself. Now, you might be thinking, wow, like, you know, these is two obviously completely different worlds, right? You're talking about one of the most notorious prison facility, well, not prison facilities, jail facilities in the world, and citing it side by side to like one of the most recognized universities in the world. And the whole purpose of this is I want to create that contrast, right? Because when we think of the school to prison pipeline, that can mean so many different things, but the reality is what it really means is it's keeping you out of one institution so that you could go to another. That's basically the ultimate end goal and ultimate end result. And a lot of that has to do with what ends up happening with somebody if they end up going to college as opposed to going to university. So we're going to get into that. Who's Jonathan Cabrera, right? As I finished breaking down, I'm a professor of criminal justice. I teach at Rutgers University, BMCC, and Hudson County Community College. I'm also a rapper slash poet slash artist, and I'm also founder and CEO of Abstract Lifestyle, which is basically a platform that I created in order to address social justice and promote music and, you know, also get young people involved in activism and things of that nature. As I mentioned, some of my professional experience involves the Department of Corrections. I worked at the halfway house the second largest halfway house in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. It's called Kintock. And I've also worked as a nonprofit director, as I mentioned, with youth who are considered quote unquote at risk. My background, educationally speaking, I got my master's in public administration from NYU. And now I have the honor and pleasure of saying that I am a South by Southwest EDU presenter. And all this by the age of 27. So, you know, right now I'm 27 years of age. I just turned 27 in November. So, you know, I'm trying to make the best of my youth, as they say. So to get into Rikers Island, this is basically what the image of it looks like from an overhead view. It's literally an island. It's located in East Elmhurst, New York, which is in Queens. And if you ever take a plane to New York, you're probably going to land in one or two places. You're going to land at John F. Kennedy Airport or LaGuardia Airport. LaGuardia is literally right across Rikers Island. Okay, so once you land in LaGuardia, when your plane lands and is getting ready to pull up to the or like literally once your plane is about to land on LaGuardia Airport, LaGuardia Airport's platform, you're literally seeing Rikers Island right across. As you can see, there's a bridge that is connecting into the island. That bridge is about a 5-minute drive from beginning to end. That's the only way on and off the island. And this island is very much a complex. It's an industry complex. As you can see, like there's different facilities going on throughout. There's 10 plus facilities, and you know, obviously this is where people are living, and you know, correctional officers and all types of employees, they spend, you know, pretty much a good portion of their day just working inside the facility and making sure that they can do the best work that they can do, at least in a lot of cases. Rikers Island is pretty much said to be about the size of Hoboken, which is a city in New Jersey. It's an interesting dynamic because when we look at even the history of corrections, a lot of the prisoners that society has had in general, they usually get cast off to the side and put in exile. One of the earlier facilities in correctional history, Norfolk Island, which dealt with some of the harshest or hardest prisoners in the Australian, you know, government, in the Australian community and things of that nature. They were sent to an island in order to basically, you know, be dealt with, quote unquote, accordingly. So we can see that practice, which you're talking about hundreds of years ago, is still happening even to this day, where we have islands. Even if you look at a facility like Alcatraz, even though they shut it down and now it's basically used for touristic purposes, it was also an island. So just keep that in mind. This was me when I was 5 years old. You're probably like, yo, oh, look at him. But the reason I have this picture in here is because, like I said, I'm from Queens originally. So when I was 5 years old, I was playing at a little league called Elm Jack. Now, Elm Jack was located in East Elmhurst as well, so it was in Queens. And I used to love playing baseball, right? I still love baseball, but obviously I was a kid. I was playing baseball a lot, and one of the things that I couldn't help but notice about playing in the field that I was at was the fact that there was this terrible stench that was coming around the baseball field. And I used to ask the coaches, like, yo, what's going on? Like, why does it smell so bad around here? And they would just tell me, oh, it's because there's a body of water. Little did I know, about 20 years later, once I started working at the island, I drive by Rikers, you know, I'm getting off Rikers and I'm going back to my house and stuff like that. And as I'm driving towards my house, leaving off Rikers, I have to go down the block, and I literally see this little league to the left, and I'm like, what? This was right down the block from Rikers this whole time. But I would have never known that because I was a little kid at the time. But as Google Maps shows right here, literally it was a 4-minute drive from Rikers Island to the little league field that I used to play at as a kid. I never knew Rikers Island was right there. I never had to go on it for no reason at the age of 5, but it's just funny how life kind of makes a full circle revolution, and pretty much I ended up working right down the block from where I used to play baseball. Now, if we're talking about the overall prison population in the United States, we're talking about over 2.3 million people who are incarcerated in the U.S. Now, that gets split up between different populations. You're talking about jails, you're talking about federal jails and prisons, and then you have state prisons. Now, you know, each type of facility has its focus on like what they deal with most. Federal prisons and jails, they tend to deal more with kind of like white collar crimes or things that have to do with organized crime and things of that nature, where a lot of the violent offenders, they might land in state prisons, or, you know, depending on what the situation is, people will land in jail. And a lot of them, the majority, are not even convicted. So overall, you have 2.3 million people in the United States who are currently behind bars on any given day. Realistically, that number is much higher because on a daily basis, you have people in and out of jail because maybe they got bonded out, or maybe, you know, they got released or whatever. So that number would really be closer, you know what I'm saying, to a much larger number. If you're talking about the overall community under some form of supervision, you're really talking about over 6 million people, because you're only talking about people behind bars right now. If you're talking about the parole and probation population, that number actually doubles, right? So there's actually over 4 million people on parole and probation combined, because there's so many people under correctional supervision as in comparison to how many jails and prisons there are, that it's impossible to hold all these people behind bars. So they have to use parole and probation in order to provide an alternative to prison. So overall, you have over 6 million people, close to 7 million people, who are basically under some form of correctional supervision, but at least 2.3 million people who are behind bars. Now, if we're talking about the U.S. incarceration rate per every 100,000 compared to every other country, the U.S. is at the very top, all right? Even though the U.S. holds 5% of the world's population, they actually hold 25% of the world's prison population, okay? Now, compare the U.S. to some other countries in regards to how many people we incarcerate per every 100,000. El Salvador comes next at 618 people that get incarcerated per every 100,000. Rwanda's right after that. Russia comes in number 4, and it's not even really a close 4. Like, they're at the halfway mark pretty much to what the U.S. is. Brazil is after that. Australia, Spain, China, Canada, France, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and India. So the U.S. is pretty much at the very top when it comes to a lot of the negativity concerning the prison population. Then when we look at the actual statistics of, you know, the demographics of people that get incarcerated, and this is coming from the Sentencing Project, 1 in every 9 men are going to see incarceration at some point, compared to 1 in every 56 women. 1 in every 17 white men will see incarceration. 1 in every 3 black men will see incarceration at some point, and 1 in every 6 Latino men will see incarceration at some point. Now, if we look at the women's statistic, right, and going back to the men real quick, you obviously could see the clear disparity, because 1 in every 3 black men, that's just insane to even think that you just got to go every 3 people, and that's 1 person that's going to see jail or prison at some point in their life. Similar for Latino men, but obviously overall you're going to see that white men have a better chance of not seeing jail or prison than black and Latino men. If we're looking at the statistics for women, that number gets even starker for white women. You're talking about 1 in every 111 white women will see incarceration at some point. All right. Compare that to 1 in every 18 black women and 1 in every 45 Latino women. All right. Now, one thing that might stick out to people the most is 1 in every 3 black men, which of course that is an eye-opening number. But to me, the thing that stands out even further is that black women are incarcerated at almost the same rate that white men are. You're talking about 1 in every 17 white men and 1 in every 18 black women. That's only a 1-person differential. You know what I'm saying? So, like, basically black women are treated the same way that white men are treated. So it kind of just outlines for you the perception of the criminal justice system towards people of color. Now, all of this is leading towards something. I'm just trying to set up the table for you in order to understand some of the general statistics about prison and incarceration in general, so that once we get into the school to prison pipeline, we can understand this, you know, from a more holistic perspective. When it comes to me naming the presentation Rikers to Rutgers, I kind of wanted to give you a background, obviously, as to me playing baseball right down the block, because as I showed you, Rikers Island was right there from the Little League that I played at. I lived in New York for the first 13 years of my life. Stop and frisk, you know, was happening and stuff like that. And even though, yeah, I was still very young, so the odds of me getting locked up compared to, let's say, somebody who's in their late teens or early 20s, it was a lot less. But you're still seeing things in the media where, for example, in Florida, you've seen a 6-year-old girl getting arrested, literally arrested, getting cuffed inside of her school, put in a police vehicle, and then she gets taken to the precinct to get a mugshot taken of her at 6 years old. Nothing at this point is beyond reason to think, right? And even when we learn, for example, about like the Central Park 5 situation, now the exonerated 5, the majority of those teenagers at the time, they were in their early teens. They were 13, 14 years old. So at the end of the day, anything could have happened. But I named it Rikers to Rutgers because being a Latino, going back to the statistic of me being a Latino male, one in every six Latino men are going to see incarceration at some point. Me growing up, you know, around some of the different environments that I've been exposed to, you know, it's like the probability of me getting incarcerated was there, you know. And so if I would have gotten locked up in New York, let's say, I would have ended up in Rikers Island. But even if it wasn't in New York, even if it was by the time I was in Jersey, having been exposed to the different elements of what it's like growing up in the hood, quote unquote, the urban community, right? Like at the end of the day, I could have seen incarceration at some point. But since I'm originally from New York, I named it Rikers, you know, like I basically just went with the Rikers tone. But then once I lived in Jersey, I applied for my master's degree, and I applied for Rutgers, and this is actually my acceptance letter. All right, now, me working at Rutgers, that didn't happen until way later. When I proposed this presentation, I wasn't even working at Rutgers at the time, so I guess I kind of spoke into existence a little bit, but I was really alluding to the fact that, you know, I could have either went to Rikers, or some kind of other jail, but I ended up getting accepted to like NYU and, of course, Rutgers. And I'm also a rapper, so there's wordplay there. Rikers to Rutgers, man. Like, come on, man. That's bars. That's bars right there. Some quick facts about Rikers. Rikers has been around since the early 1900s. The island is named after Richard Rikers. So basically, this was a judge who, because a lot of times when we think of the term slavery, we think of down south, but oftentimes we forget slavery existed up north as well. New York at one point was one of the states that owned the most amount of slaves, all right? And New Jersey was actually the last northern state to abolish slavery. But when we think of the name Rikers Island, people don't really understand where it comes from. It's named after Richard Riker, who he was a judge, and he basically was taking kickbacks and expediting the process of freed slaves, of free men up here in the north, basically being taken down south to get sold into slavery. Because the thing is, bounty hunters used to come up north so that they could take free men and basically take them down south, but they would lie and say that these were runaway slaves. At the time, there was an act called the Fugitive Slave Act, which meant even though the North wasn't practicing slavery like the South at one point, if there was a runaway slave from the South that went up north, the North had the obligation to basically send that slave back down south. So now these bounty hunters, they would go up north, and obviously they would steal men who never were once even in slavery at any point in their lives. They were born free and they lived, and they only knew freedom their whole life. They were basically snatched into slavery and brought to court, brought to this judge, and the judge basically legalized and expedited the process of them getting sold into slavery. right? So this is literally who the island is named after, this specific judge. And of course, the island is predominantly people of color, predominantly Black and Hispanic. Rikers Island, the actual island itself is, if you look at the landmass, it wasn't that big originally. It was a much smaller landmass. You're talking about, you know, an island that, again, it's about the size of Hoboken at this point, which is a city in New Jersey. But originally it was a much smaller island. Before Rikers, the incarcerated population, they were on Roosevelt Island, and basically they got moved over to Rikers. But when they got moved over to Rikers, once the city bought that island from the Riken family, basically the prisoners were moved over there along with landfill. So they brought literal trash, literal landfill, and started mounting it on top of the island, expanding its parameters, expanding its how do I say, its area, right? And started making it larger. So that clump of land that was the island originally started expanding, started becoming larger, but it started becoming larger because trash was being mounted on top of it. Now, we already know with trash, certain things come with it, right? Like pests. Along with the trash came a lot of rats. And so when they started seeing that there was a huge rat infestation, what officials did was they actually brought dogs onto the island, and they starved the dogs and basically allowed the dogs to only develop an appetite for the rats. And so the dogs, they basically were eating the rats. And even in them doing that, it was still too many rats in order for them to overcome, basically, you know, because they're going to reproduce at a rapid rate, and there's just really no way of coping with that situation. Apart from that, you also have early accounts where, because along with the landfill that's underneath the soil, you're talking about the decomposition of whatever is under there. So, you know, gases are trying to come up, you know, from up under the soil, and there's early accounts where like gases are literally, you know, bursting through the soil, and like little sparks of flames would develop and stuff like that. To the point where somebody said when you walk down the island, it looked like you were walking through an isle of mini volcanoes. Like, this is the early history of Rikers Island, and people don't realize this is where we have 10,000 plus people living there on any given day. All right. So you basically have like a brief history of Rikers Island here. I needed to give you that background because a lot of people may say, oh, boy, you know, you commit the crime, you got to do the time. But the reality is the majority of people who are incarcerated at some point will come back into the community. All right. Unless obviously you're a murderer, you know what I'm saying? That is you're probably going to see 25 to life. Unless you're a murderer, which that's a small percentage of the incarcerated population. It's like the majority of these guys are going to come back into the community. About 80% of the like definitely more than half of the population on the island comes back into the community. These are people that you ride, you know, the train with, that you get on the bus with, that their kids are going to the same school as your kids. And so it's important for us to consider all of this when it comes to the incarcerated population, because if this is what we're sending our citizens to, it's like once they come back to the community, what can we expect, you know, in regards to their rehabilitation? It's going to be very difficult. And I'm only talking about just the hygienic aspects of living on the island. I'm not even talking about the actual jail politics and all the other stuff that happens, because that's its own conversation. And of course, now they're planning on trying to close down Rikers. We'll see how that goes. Now, compare that to Rutgers University, right? This is just beautiful. You know, this is actually the New Brunswick campus, but, you know, Rutgers is just a beautiful campus in general. Whether you go to the New Brunswick one, the Newark one, or the one in Camden, they're all beautiful. It's a state university. It holds about 70,000 Rutgers students, 8th oldest institution of higher learning in the U.S., about 9,000 international students from 125 countries, and 180 study abroad programs from Rutgers to 60 countries. So you basically are comparing a land of opportunity to a land of waste. And I'm telling you this as somebody that worked on the island. Like, it's just insane. Like somebody from the hood has the opportunity to go to this, but they probably won't, because by the time that these statistics become real, it already determines where they end up going. Now, this is kind of why I want to focus on the school to prison pipeline, because all of this happens at a young age, right? So we might think, oh, somebody became a hardened criminal later on in life, but a lot of the reasons why somebody might become a hardened criminal, right, is not necessarily because they want to, but because people were already speaking this over them since even before they were born. Again, there's children who are not born yet that this image right here is going to be true of them. So there's already things being put out into the atmosphere, into the air, stating, oh, you're going to end up being a statistic, you're going to be this, you're going to be that. But the reality is, it's a lot of lack of opportunity. And even once kids are being transitioned throughout the school system, there's clearly a huge disparity in regards to how the treatment is specifically for Black students. If we look at the definition of what is the school to prison pipeline, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund basically says it's the depriving of children and youth of meaningful opportunities for education, future employment, and participation in our democracy. And this is basically done through the funneling of students out of school and into the streets and juvenile correctional systems, which then becomes a cycle known as the school to prison pipeline. So this is literally a machine, right? It's a cycle that has already its gears and its switches in place. And basically it's keeping you out of one door and putting you into another. If we look at some of the figures that the ACLU has provided for us, you're talking about the majority of public school enrollment is actually comprised of the white community, which it's also true of the United States overall population, right? There's more people from the white community that consume the general population in the US, and overwhelmingly than Black or Hispanic populations even combined. You could combine the Black and Hispanic population in the US and it still doesn't even make up the white population here in the United States. But yet there is an overrepresentation of Black and Hispanic communities in jails and in prisons compared to the white community. Now, this is also true in the school system, where we see multiple suspensions being primarily dished out to the Black community, even though there's more people from the white community attending public schools. Black students represent 31% of school-related arrests. Black students are suspended and expelled 3 times more than white students. And students suspended or expelled for discretionary violation are nearly 3 times more likely to be in contact with the juvenile justice system the following year. So you're talking about just in a 1-year time frame, they're 3 times more likely to be in contact with the juvenile justice system. Why is this big? Why is this important? Because if a young person, let's say somebody who's 15, 16 years of age, if they don't feel that there's a space for them, we're in a place where they're supposed to feel the most safe, which is a space of education and a space of learning, then what hope do they have for themselves in regards to what am I going to be in the future? What am I going to do with myself? This and that. When a lot of the imagery that they're being exposed to, unfortunately, is mass incarceration, is the school to prison pipeline, is selling drugs, or, robbing, or doing, low-level offenses or petty crime and things of that nature. So ultimately, the institute that's supposed to be the most supportive of them ends up rejecting them the most, even though they make up a lesser population of public school enrollment than the white community. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like you're already talking about, there's so many layers to this. Like let's remove ourselves from the school system for a second. Just look at the family dynamic. The likelihood of this young student growing up in a single parent home is pretty real, right? the likelihood of them knowing somebody that, you know, has done drugs or has, you know, been part of gangs or, you know, has seen incarceration at some point in their life, that's also a pretty probable statistic as well. So you're already aggregating these different factors that already exist even prior to going into school. Now include the school system shunning and rejecting these students at a young age where they still haven't even developed themselves identity-wise, right? At a young age, just think back when you were a teenager, you still didn't even know who you were. Being accepted was a very important part of your life. And so imagine being rejected by family, being rejected by friends, by the government, by the system, and then by the school and educators. It's like you're basically being led into this thinking and this mentality that your life really isn't worth anything. And why should I do anything productive, or, you know, or how can I even expect to be anybody if everybody really thinks that I'm not even worth a dime. Now, when we look at, for example, the similarities of classrooms and the prison system, or even just the jail and prison system in general, there's similarities. Like if you look at the classroom on the right, even though this is a very, you know, decorative, nice little Christian school out in Prince Edward Island, you can see that it looks very similar to how people are sitting inside of a facility in New York. And so even though this is out of the control of educators to some extent, I just want to create the awareness that, look, there is an architectural design that's happening that we may or may not be realizing exists, okay? If we compare the similarities between one classroom to the next, it's pretty much identical. And the reality is, you could go back as far back as the early 1900s. There's a 100-year difference in this image right here, and you can see that the classroom pretty much has remained the same, and there has virtually been no change in regards to even just the appearance of the classroom. Now, we can't say the same thing about our vehicles. You could go back to 1976 and you could compare a Honda back then to a Honda now. It's not even the same vehicle anymore. It looks completely different. It runs different. Everything is just different, period. All right? Maybe capitalism has something to do with it, but at the end of the day, I don't really see too many people complaining about this. We could say the same thing about a Toyota from 1994. You compare that to a vehicle in 2012, the same Toyota vehicle, and it's pretty much a whole different vehicle. We could say the same thing for cell phones, right? You remember them old throwback, oh, my phone looked like a brick phone? Yeah. Throughout the process of maybe about 20 years, we've seen the evolution of cell phones happen dramatically, from that old brick phone to the Nokias, to the Samsungs, to now we got iPhones and we got Galaxies and things of that nature. So cell phones have seen a pretty significant evolution within even just a 10-year time frame, and especially in the 20-year time frame. And then even when we look at architecture, because the excuse that, you know, we can't change the architecture of our schools, it just doesn't stand, because we have buildings continually being renovated and revamped, and you know, we have new structures being built up on a daily basis. From, you know, back in the day, the Empire State Building may have been like the most impressive building at one point, where now you could go to Dubai and that's like one of the most visited structures. I believe one of the tallest buildings is out in Dubai. Like, everybody goes over there, and it's one of the most impressive features that people can just soak in. So even throughout the process of time, we've seen the developments that have happened architecturally, even with buildings. Even if you go to the World Trade Center now, how the new World Trade Center looks is just marvelous, pretty much. And the reason why I'm bringing up the architecture is because one thing that I wanna put out there, and I'm gonna unshare the screen real quick. Pardon me, because I need you to be right here with me for this, right? One of the reasons why I want to share this with you, just the design and the architectural component of it, is because me having worked inside of Rikers Island, I remember the first week when I started working in there, and I kind of came to like this weird nostalgic feeling at one point. I'm like, man, like, why does it feel like I've been here before? And I really had to sit down and contemplate this, and it was very difficult for me to process because I never stepped foot in Rikers prior to me working there. I had to take that whole first week to pretty much just think about this and ponder. And as I sat down and reflected and thought about it, then it finally hit me, and I said, wow, like the reason why I feel like I've been here before is because of high school. You know, when I went to high school, you had to go through metal detectors. You had to get wanded down. You got patted down. The hallways were dim in regards to the lighting. Even just the ambiance, the energy of the different individuals that you come across is like a lot of the guys that I've met in Rikers Island, I could have easily been friends with them in high school or even just in the community, you know, on the block, whatever. And so, you know, even just me in my own life, like a lot of people that I do know have seen incarceration at some point, have unfortunately been subject to the school to prison pipeline. And so it was a throwback to me of what I had already experienced. You know what I'm saying? And so if this is true of me, not ever having been incarcerated in Rikers Island, but yeah, I can still feel like this sense of nostalgia, even though I never was in the island. It's like how telling is that of every other young person who grows up in a community like this, you know, and it makes the transition so much easier because it's like it doesn't really feel that much different as opposed to, let's say, if you came from a suburb and then you get thrown into a place like Rikers Island. That's a complete culture shock for you. Like it would make sense if somebody decided to take their life at that point, where somebody who not endorsing it obviously, but it would make more sense. Excuse me. It would make more sense for that to happen because obviously it's such a culture shock as opposed to somebody who already experienced this to some degree in the public, excuse me, in the public school system. Sorry, I have allergies right now. And then they went into a jail facility and they're like, wow, this is basically just deja vu of what I already experienced. So design, architecture, all of that is very important. I'm gonna share the screen again. Even going back to this slide right here of Rikers, you pretty much got an overhead view of some of the facilities. If you compare this to like, I'm gonna show you right now. If you compare this to one of the largest housing projects in the United States, this is actually the largest housing projects in the US. You can see that the overhead view of this is similar to one of the facilities on the island. You know what I'm saying? So you're talking about public housing. Talking about public housing is basically set up in a way where it basically replicates and looks just like some of these facilities. And so if somebody wants to argue that your background really doesn't play a factor in all this, all you got to do is just show them that imagery right there, and it pretty much is going to put a stamp on the point that needs to be proven. Now, when it comes to the classroom dynamics in general, student-teacher relationship, teachers usually tell students what to do. Students are usually in uniform. Students are conditioned to follow a schedule. It's a one-sided relationship. This is very similar to what they do in jail, right? The correctional officers tell students what to do. The people in the facilities usually have uniform. Students are conditioned to follow a schedule, so are the individuals who are incarcerated, and pretty much a one-sided relationship. Why does the school to prison pipeline exist? Slavery. Now, you might think, wow, like that's pretty extreme. Why would you say that? Well, I'm going to get into it. this right here, in the middle, you see a diagram of Eastern State Penitentiary. This is an overhead view of it. Eastern State Penitentiary was created in the 1800s. It's one of the first facilities created in the United States, because before this, punishment used to happen in public. People were flogged in public. They were put in pillories in public. Executions happened in public way back in the day. But after the Enlightenment era, you know, people felt guilty about torturing people, because that's basically what it was. And so they created, you know, they started creating facilities where you had this out of sight, out of mind mentality, where instead of me seeing somebody get punished, just put them behind walls so that I don't even know that they exist, right? So Eastern State Penitentiary, literally the word penitentiary comes out of the word penance, which, because since America in its early forms, in its early history, was very Protestant in nature, they basically sent people to the penitentiary to, quote unquote, perform penance, which basically meant to reflect, to read the Bible, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is an overhead view of Eastern State Penitentiary, and you see on the right is an overhead view of what a slave ship looked like back in the day, right? You compare them side by side, and it's pretty eerie, the similarities between the two. Now, if you want to say it's a stretch, listen, you're entitled to say what you need to say, but having studied corrections and having broken down different things in the criminal justice system, even just the example of the New York housing projects looking just like a facility in Rikers Island, to me is not coincidence. Examples of American slavery, you have the obvious transatlantic slave trade. You have Jim Crow laws, the 13th Amendment, crime bills that came as a result of Bill Clinton or, you know, Ronald Reagan or things of that nature, and then stop and frisk. Now, going back to the 13th Amendment, the 13th Amendment says slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist in the U.S. nor any jurisdiction or territory of it, except under the circumstance where someone is duly convicted. So the 13th Amendment states slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist under no conditions except under the basis where somebody's convicted. So that's the loophole right there. So basically, this amendment is stating slavery is still legal only in the context in which somebody is a convict. And so I'm pretty sure you've heard of this before. When somebody's a convict, when they're incarcerated, they get referred to as being state property. What were slaves back in the day? They were considered to be property. And so it's basically the same jargon, the same language. One thing about the criminal justice system is that language plays a very big role in everything. And so right here, we're obviously seeing how that's true. Examples of American slavery, right? If we're looking back at some of the throwback ideas of it, if you were a slave, you weren't allowed to vote. If you're incarcerated, you know, or somebody on parole, you're not allowed to vote. If you were a slave, you know, or if you were a person of color, specifically Black, you know, and we're talking about slavery and even like civil rights era, right? It was legal for people to discriminate against you. If you're a convict, right, quote unquote convict, or a, you know, formerly incarcerated person, employers can legally discriminate against you. That's the only time where discrimination is legal in this country, okay? If you're somebody who has, let's say, a drug charge on you, specifically a drug charge, which, to be honest, is probably the most entrepreneurial offense out of all of them, because at the end of the day, you're basically using business savvy in order to orchestrate whatever you're doing or to operate how you're moving. And at the end of the day, obviously, yes, morally, you know, drugs do destroy the community. It does affect families and livelihoods. But at the same time, it is a quote-unquote victimless crime in the sense that nobody is forcing you to take the drugs, right? The majority of the times, people that are, you know, buying the drugs, or the people that are distributing the drugs are distributing it to people that are willing participants consuming the drug. So it's not something that's being coerced or being forced onto people. It's something that people usually willingly accept. But drug dealers specifically, if they wanted to go to college at some point after they, did their time and everything, they can't qualify for financial aid, right? Which obviously is a big factor in regards to going to college. How can you go to college now? Even college students could barely go to college. People who don't have records could barely go to college. Imagine you having a record on you and you want to go to college, but you're being denied financial aid because from lack of opportunity, in many cases, you decided that you needed to sell drugs and financially empower yourself in that way. You did your time already. You're trying to improve your life and improve your impact on what you could do in the community, but now you're being denied financial aid. Come on, it's very difficult to get yourself up because a lot of people say, oh, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, but you don't even have boots to pull yourself up by, so that's true of financial aid. That's also true of if you have a drug offense and you want to apply for housing, if you want to apply for welfare and SNAP, you could get denied from those things as well. And some of the effects of coming out of this system is you come out with trauma, you have PTSD. Being incarcerated is literally the equivalent of going to war. Because literally when you get incarcerated, like they say that you're going to gladiator school, right? You have to literally survive. It's no longer just about doing your bid, doing your time or whatever. You have to literally survive because jail and prison politics is a whole world in its own. Like, you will never understand that world if you never stepped foot into it. And even if you step foot into it, you'll never completely understand it unless you spend a good amount of time in it. Homelessness. A lot of individuals who come out of jail or come out of prison, they don't have nowhere to go to. They end up being homeless. People want these individuals to get a job. But it's like, how can you even think about getting a job when you don't even have a place to stay? And a lot of individuals who don't end up being homeless probably don't end up being homeless because they stood with their grandmother, a 30-year-old man, 40-year-old man staying with their grandmother. Maybe they have, their lady holding them down, for the time being, but it's a shot to the ego. It's a shot to, to just the pride of a lot of these individuals to say, man, I can't be a provider. And if I'm to provide the way that I used to do it, I'm going to end up going back to jail or prison, And of course, this system leaves broken homes and broken families, very similar to how slavery did back in the day. Now, I'm mentioning the school to prison pipeline again because even though we might not be able to change the actual architecture of the schools and the facilities that you might work at, one thing that you can change is the environment within the classroom itself. Now, if we're talking about predominantly Black and brown students, a reality of just being Black and Hispanic is culture, right? Acknowledging the history of slavery. One thing that has kept the Black and brown spirit alive throughout the years of oppression and racism and stuff like that has been our love for music, has been our love for dance, creativity, performing arts, things of that nature. For an educator, and to be quite candid, a white educator, to say that there's no place for that in the classroom, that's more just being culturally deficient. Because at the end of the day, me being a professor, having my master's degree, having gone to NYU, and having all these different background experiences, I can tell you firsthand experience, and also being a rapper myself, that music is one of the most intellectually stimulating things that you could expose yourself to. Hip hop in itself is a language, and we already know once you learn languages, you're able to withhold information mentally a lot longer. You're able to develop certain skills. Your vocabulary improves. Certain rappers have come out and said, look, the reason why I'm able to rap so good is because I made it my priority to learn new vocabulary words, read the dictionary, et cetera, et cetera. So hip hop needs a space in the classroom because for a lot of students, this is their strength, right? If you're trying to tell your student to get accustomed to learning how to basically, let me unshare this. If you're telling your student that basically they have to learn how to learn your way, you've already lost. And I'm just being honest with you because it's impossible for you to tell somebody, for you to describe to somebody a color that they've never seen. You know what I'm saying? Imagine you trying to tell somebody, oh, what does the color magenta look like? And they never seen what the color magenta is. You know, like that's kind of like the best visual example that I could display, right? Like you can't do something that you never saw before or you never learned. And if you're expecting for them to just get it like that, just because, quote unquote, that's how it's been, clearly you're missing the greater point. At the end of the day, the point is for them to learn. And if learning comes in the form of something that they're very familiar with, then so be it. It has to be like that. And learning becomes more experiential and more interesting and stimulating when it's done through something that you actually enjoy. Me having, been through the public school system and, eventually going to graduate school, being in a program where the majority of the students were white or they came from a privileged background, and a lot of them were working, for example, for City Hall or have worked for the president, stuff like that. Like, I had a hard time keeping up with a lot of these individuals. So what I would have to do is I would have to take certain things from the lessons and I would have to write them in song form and then basically recite them to myself in that fashion in order for me to learn. If that's what you need to do, that's what's necessary, because at the end, we're not going to play out the impact of hip hop or even any of these other art forms in the classroom, right? Hip hop in this current society that we live in has become the most consumed genre out of any musical genre. So right now, hip hop is grossing $10 billion on an annual basis, right? Hip hop has only been around since the late 70s. Really, it didn't take off until like the early 80s, but it's been around since the late 70s. Compare that to Major League Baseball, that has been around for over 100 years. Major League Baseball just reached a record of making over $10 billion. Hip hop in less than half the time was able to meet baseball in regards to the overall revenue that it makes. And the reality is hip hop is no longer just a black and brown thing. It's become something that is consumed throughout all of America, because at one point hip hop was one dimensional. It was talking about the streets. It was talking about the gritty this, the gritty that. And just because you were black or Hispanic didn't mean that you were necessarily part of the hip hop community, because maybe you just weren't cut out for that, right? But now there's so many different subgenres and topics within the hip hop genre. Like you got conscious rap, you got trap, you got country rap, you got all types of different rap. Like Lil Nas X came out with, Old Town Road, and now you got a whole community of people who listen to country music liking hip hop now. When Eminem first came out, he reached a whole demographic of America in the white community that Jay-Z or Busta Rhymes couldn't reach, So at the end, hip hop is continually expanding. It's only going to continue to grow. It's global. It's international. And it's like, whether you go with it or not, your students are going to continue to listen to hip hop. And so instead of going against the grain, it's better to just take the thing that they enjoy so passionately and just include it in the classroom. And one way you could do this is by allowing them to dissect videos that have to do with your topic. So let's say you're teaching science, maybe, pulling up a rap song that gets into like the different sciences and things of that nature, and kind of just, dissecting the lyrics. If you teach Spanish, for example, telling the students to take a reggaeton song or a Spanish rap song and breaking it down, you know. Me, I teach criminal justice. It's very easy for me to include hip hop in my classroom because oftentimes hip hop talks about social ills that happen at the hand of police or law enforcement. And a lot of individuals have been incarcerated at some point. So it always creates that easy access for me to just incorporate it into the classroom. And then me, myself, being a rapper, I actually rap for my students. Now, this presentation right here is supposed to be, you know, part presentation and also a performance. So I'm going to get into the performance aspect of it as well. But overall, I just wanted to touch on these general points because if we're talking about the school to prison pipeline, none of this is by coincidence. You have a structure that's basically continuing the legacy of slavery, but in a different form, because again, the 13th Amendment allows for slavery to happen only under the condition in which people are, quote unquote, convicted. Now, why do you think that predominantly Black and Hispanic people are the ones being primarily convicted? Because you're talking about a continuation of this system of slavery that was already there. The 13th Amendment came shortly after the Civil War happened, and basically slavery was, quote unquote, abolished at that point, right? But what ended up happening was because the economy down south was so, you know, dependent on slavery, they basically put pressure on the government to create some kind of alternative to, you know, them having, quote unquote, slaves. So shortly after the Civil War, you know, arrests were happening at a rapid rate for small petty offenses like loitering or small acts of vagrancy and things of that nature. And basically Black men were being taken away from their family and being convicted. And then a lot of these former plantation owners, what they would do is they were allowed to lease these convicts. It was called convict leasing. The same way that you would lease a vehicle or that you could lease an apartment, they were leasing convicts and basically had them working on their plantation all over again. And literally it was slavery all over again. To this day, you have the incarcerated population. They're working for less than minimum wage, less than legal minimum wage pay. You know, when I was in Rikers Island and I did the payroll for a lot of the dudes incarcerated, you know, who they will get paid for participating in our program. They will get paid like $2.50 per hour, you know, and that's like actually good because there were people getting paid less than that, you know, and they were doing, you know, they were cleaning the jails and they were, you know, doing all the hard labor stuff that somebody out here gets paid at least minimum wage for, you know, but in there they're getting paid nothing. You know what I'm saying? Victoria's Secret for a long time profited off of prison labor. You know, you have different companies who have benefited off of prison labor and things of that nature. In California, they actually send prisoners who want to go as volunteer firefighters, and they pay them $1 an hour to put out these massive forest fires that last days, sometimes even weeks, as opposed to paying actual fire departments, you know, because they're trying to save money and stuff like that. So you're literally seeing how, you know, slave labor is still happening even in the correctional system to this day, but it's just not highlighted and broadcasted in the same light because, you know, nobody wants to believe that slavery still exists to this day. It's literally just a more mutated and modernized form of it, but it still exists. And so if you're talking about the school to prison pipeline, once you allow these students to get conditioned to thinking that my background and my culture isn't invited into this space of learning, you know, and that's why somebody from the Black community is 3 times more likely to get suspended or expelled than a white student. It's like you're already planting the seeds inside of that person's life, inside of that student's life, that education isn't for them, and that preferably I should rob somebody or sell drugs or something of that nature. So, you know, this is a sad reality in in the Black and brown community, but it's something that needed to be said. Me personally, I remember being in high school, you know, having to navigate all of these, you know, all of these complexities, all of these difficult situations and circumstances, getting, you know, getting jumped, having been in fights. You know, at 16, I was bringing a knife to school every day, you know, and it wasn't something that I wanted to do, but it was something that I felt at the time I needed to do. Like, there were people who had guns. There were people, like, when I was on the baseball team, I've seen fellow players bring a duffel bag through the front, and in the back compartment they got a machete the same size as a bat. You know what I'm saying? And then they're talking about in the locker room, oh, this is what I'm gonna do with this and da da da. So it's like, you know, you're not even a full grown adult yet, and you're going through trauma that, you know, it's already been proven that in certain, like in inner cities, young people go through trauma at the same rate, and in some communities even higher than war veterans who came back from Iran. You know, so it's a sad reality. And you're talking about juveniles, people that are not even full-fledged adults. The prefrontal cortex is still not even fully developed. All right, you don't stop developing mentally, right? Like on a physiological level until you're in your mid-20s, and for men even as far as into their late 20s, early 30s. So you're talking about the reward system, the ability to think, it automatically, you know, becomes difficult throughout the process of time, just because you're not able to process information at the rate that you need to. So I'm basically going to do a spoken word / rap presentation at this point. The whole purpose of this is I was supposed to do the presentation, but I was also supposed to do a performance. So this is what it's going to be right here. I'm just going to talk about different life experiences. And I kind of just want to share these things with you because this is how I introduce rap into the classroom. But then this is also something that I'm very passionate about, obviously as a professor, but also as an artist. So I'm just going to place my laptop right here. I need to get my charger because the battery's about to die. Apologies for my allergies too. It's about that time. So, like I said, these songs or these tracks, I'm gonna do them a cappella, and they're basically talking about some of the different life experiences and difficulties that I may have had to go through growing up. And I find that a lot of these tracks, when I perform them for my students, they actually, like, it actually resonates very heavily with them. And they actually have a different appreciation for the classroom as a result of it. Now, I'm not saying that you gotta rap. If you can't rap, don't attempt it. But it definitely is helpful for you to be able to relate with the students and to at least introduce rap to whatever extent. My apologies if it got a little more glitchy. My battery was running out right now. Let's see. All right. You hear tales about the gunshots, then you find that the sun drops. Now my eyes to the moonlight, similar when the sun drops. Everybody want to tell me how with them is really going to be a different story. But this life and death thing are real. Neither of them are just allegories. Fighting hard deep within myself. Waging war just to overcome. If I had visions while I held my knife, how to be with a loaded gun. Little man, I just spit my truth. Apologize if I'm real blunt. Couldn't handle this and just look at you. You just heard from a real one. I'm here. Sitting in the back, thinking the folk in his life for walking in contact. People I knew just smoking their weed, sipping some hen in the cognac. Some of these people I know, unfortunately now, that are in jail. Life is so frail, a system that fails. Clean people, I'm pursuing reading in braille. Navigating through these revolutions, not only you worry about paying your bills, Weapons and tools that are using and using, now you gotta worry about not getting killed. Took your losses for surviving later. Screw all the haters. A detonator stuck inside of my chest. No time for rest. Could be innocent from banging and shooting. That moment of God be the moment. Momentum will take you to God because the bullet's inside of your neck. Feels like everybody's catching bodies. There's no anybody's in my body. Is there anybody in these city parties that can help me make it to my building lobby? Even to my Porsche. You drive your Porsche. See, your money's long and my life is short. I don't even know what to think. I don't even really know what to say. Could a brother even blink for the clink of a thing? Make it stink with your blood. Was your body gonna lay? Could I really even pray? Feeling like Rambo. Catch me the blade with some ammo. Been deserted with the rappers and the trappers, and I'm dying here thirst when I blow her like a camel. So that one right there I call blasted, because there's something to be said. Like when you're mentally, you just shot out. You're like, I'm gone. Like, I'm just done, right? And so for me, in my mind, I'm like, man, I'm just blasted, you know? And so it's one of those things where you kind of create your own definitions and things of that nature in order to live up to the, how should I say, to kind of like the idea of like what you're going through and things of that nature. So I'm going to look for another song that I could perform for you. As you can see, there's different sounds here in the nighttime in Florida. I'm staying over here quarantined, at least until, you know, things switch up and what have you. Okay, so this was a song I recently did. It's called "To My Last Breath." And this one I'm basically talking about, you know, living life to the fullest, you know, like, especially when you grow up in a certain community, it's like, you don't really know if you're going to see another day. And it's unfortunate that you have to think like that, but it's just the reality. And this is pretty much how it goes. To my last breath, I'ma have no regret. I'ma live with no need till my soul he collect. If it's a shooter who know how I'ma get. Yo, when it's time, I'ma cash in the check. When it's time, gotta clear your mind, no point even fight back. Ain't no way that you can know what your story hold, no way you could write that. In the book of life, it's already written, homie, you can never write that. Catch your days and a life back. Go ahead, you can light that. Raving and running, the raven is running, never confused, ever being a dove. The payment is humming from all of the hits that they make from the use of mass hoodie and glove. This ain't no single, just be the joint that your family and friends could turn up at the club. Morgan's a club and you know that's a dub, but it's he's showing the youngest here love. Seen a young homie, age 22, rest his soul could have border, been around the same age when put in the box. Out of a box, he was poked by an object we know was a blade for healing the spirit. Some of these homes spill our doctrine up. Doctrine of old like the burning the sage. Doctors bring life, but they live to his name. Now here's a home that is never the same. Streets filled with malice, callous most of the ways. Callous forming, holding weapons every day. Piecing up this jigsaw, saw this is a game. Don't care if you're ready, still you're gonna play. Heavy with the hitters, heavy with the liquor. Imagine what the blend will do of this elixir. Can you get the picture? Razor or a trigger, brother acting bigger every other day. Trip to Miami. How then I know that my plane would have suddenly blown the sky? Just look at Kobe. Youngest select just by Earth had to give him an early goodbye with his baby Gianna. But look at God left for shorty and basketball right by his side. Maybe my fate and destiny is in mine. Still death could give me a way that is kind to my last breath. So that right there, as I said, is talking about like me living life until the very end, basically until the wheels fall off. And, you know, hopefully I could continue to live more days because ain't nothing guaranteed. I remember being 13 years of age and I had gotten into a situation, you know, where unfortunately I had to get stitches on my brow, you know, just regular hood politics basically. And I remember like that day could have literally been my last day and I was only 13 years of age. At 12 years old, I had an individual flash a gun at me, you know, for something pretty much insignificant, you know. And so there's different things to consider. You have to realize that along with a student trying to understand your material and the content that you're putting into the classroom, they're also wrestling with their own identity. They're also wrestling with if they even deserve to live or if it's already predestined for them to either be locked up or to die, you know? And for me, when I first was entering high school, one of the first things I did, you know, my freshman year is I started looking at the yearbooks from the early 2000s. I first entered high school in 2006, and I'm looking at yearbooks from like 2000 to 2005, and literally every page that I'm flipping through, I seen at least one RIP, 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 RIP. I'm like, yo, like, these students are just recently graduated. Like, how is it possible that so many students literally are dead? Like, it's crazy, you know? And that was just a reality, unfortunately. And so, you know, you have to navigate trying to do good in school, but then at the same time, finding a way to get past this trauma and this PTSD, because all of that is trauma. All of that develops, you know, a level of anxiety that you may or may not be able to overcome. Earlier this year, there was a rapper by the name of Pop Smoke. He was a Brooklyn rapper. You know, he was very popular, even though his content was, you know, it talked a lot about, you know, things that probably weren't going to help anybody in a positive sense. You know, but like he was talking about shooting people and different stuff. But it was the reality that he was exposed to and that he was around. And so that's one thing I understand about music. I don't approach it from the perspective of judging an individual. Like, I accept these realities because it's the reality of that person. They're sharing their perspective, their angle, and everybody has a different way of doing it. But Pop Smoke, he was a very much beloved rapper in the community. And one thing that one song that he wrote was called PTSD. And so this is just kind of like me giving my own spin to the PTSD track, because it definitely spoke to me when he did it. My PTSD starting to kick in, I'm just trying to get by. Everybody all around me try to get low, ducking bullets, making sure another younger don't die. They still want to try and show they come back for more. My PTSD starting to kick in, I'm just trying to get by. Everybody all around me try to get low, ducking bullets, making sure another younger don't die. They still want to try and show they come back for more. Pain in the morning, pain in the eve, pain leave them morning, pain make them grieve. You ain't gotta be part of culture, go down as a statistic. The pound leave anyone round with ballistics. Cause when that heavy metal comes, sounds ringing like a drum, you ain't gotta be gang to get numb. Just live around shooters, hoodlums, and bedlums to see a youngin' whine while he getting better rum. Talking about cocaine, brothers here is propane for that gas to get you up, and you're running on propane, jacked up on that diesel for revenges of no gain. Next morning they read you on the news, you's a known name. Couple of good men who just living for her fame by a couple of good men, I mean misunderstood man. Everyone judge you till they walk in your shoes. Everyone love you till it's just only you. That's right, the stack right, the pack right. Everybody with it if they know that the cash right. Ripping and running, you know, homie, that fast life. To throw your life underneath the dumps of the trash life. That's right, you ain't gotta be there, you just gotta live it up. So much easier said, you ain't gotta give it up. Gun pointed at your head, what you gonna do? Is you gonna do something or just let them shoot? It's a lot of things that you just got to go and make it through. Yeah, you know that over here you got to really make it through. Yeah. Uh-huh. My PTSD started kicking. I'm just trying to get by. Everybody all around me try to get low. Ducking bullets, making sure another youngin' don't die. They still want to try and show they come back for more. My PTSD started kicking. I'm just trying to get by. Everybody all around me try to get low. Ducking bullets, making sure another youngin' don't die. They still want to try and show they come back for more. Now this right here, this is another track. This one I call Storm. And this is based off, you know, me going through some thoughts, you know, when I was a teenager and stuff like that. I mean, I wrote this obviously later in life, but I still always reflect on those years of just feeling like I'm literally like in the storm. The state of this battle, the quaking of my soul, feel it rattle through the aching of my dome. Take it slow when my flannel gotta shake it, take it low, let it blow like the camel on the box of 6. You're alone to your soul, to this man will get my handle. How much more can I handle? Before I grab a handle, send you home to your dad too. I meant this way too often. There's a coffin waiting for you to just get tossed in the heat up. I meet is red, you'll be coughing. I say obtrusive, yeah, it's become the norm. How else can I overcome and trying to make it out the storm? So gotta live and perform. Expect me to hold my form, expect me to carry weight, but wait, I can't anymore. Our body just hit the floor. They steady planning his wake. We far from being awake. We still live filthy and poor. So what's the score? Why even play anymore? We're making it out the hus become a law. Flushed out of the gutter, rock your butters out the trenches. Better not be stutter or your mother by the benches. Butterflies might flutter, but you flutter through dimensions. Then your body's covered, then recovered for the mentions. Righteous pop your top might wind up with the mother wrenches. There's somebody's past, they lost his son or someone's vengeance. From an environment where this becomes the norm, how else can I overcome and trying to make it out the storm? Let's see what else I got. I like this one that I'm about to perform. I forgot that I was even going to perform this right here. So this one is actually dedicated to the school to prison pipeline presentation. So I'm going to go forward with this one. There's a little more motivational, inspirational, and all that good stuff. Excuse me. And my ancestors' wildest dreams coming to fruition. My people come from places where we have rotten conditions. According to the bureaus, I'm supposed to be a statistic. Analytics call me criminal for my birth or existence. I'm out here with a blaze, some got a Glock for resistance. I'm just trying to stay safe from shock of going ballistic. The media try to ruin us with shots of our image. They don't show us going to Harvard, only shots of ballistics. We on the front page, it look like a gun range. Call a brother thug strange, one white snort the cocaine. College they the plug main, then the model ball main. We know to play sports, all state me no cage. Quick to hook a brother up a pair of state greens. People who are higher up just want to stay green. Opioid and epidemic like the crack scene. They want us to stay folks or want us to stay fiends. All these politicians just be talking, don't be walking. All this political jargon cover up many your caucus. Never side with issues less in need of our support. Otherwise, we up in court. If you're running for a caucus genocidal, then it turns suicidal. Living life on survival, put their hand on the Bible. Money remains their idol, office remains idle. Asking for an inch now, we never get a mile. How will people be sobbing? All of this got me throbbing. Youngers began robbing. We have no Batman and Robin. They done killed all our heroes. Memory of them zero. Homie, this here is jungle and lion tigers is feral. School to prison pipeline, the pipe dreams, the prison got no bike lines cause you were pipe fiends. Homie on this island, dudes be wildin', you might see a lot of stuff in daytime reserved for the night scene. You see some brothers getting murdered up, homie stabbed up. You see some youngins getting jumped out, getting grabbed up, get sexually assaulted and get told to man up. And if you don't man up, then you might just hang up on everything. Everything is everything. Food calls your wedding ring. Promise your life's up for grabs, reinvented slavery. Get them while the young, hyper suspension explosions. Way to keep them ignorant, education give convulsions. Anytime they think about school, they think of trauma. Tears will shed from the disappointment of their mama. Teacher once told them they'll never amount to nothing. That teacher up in the future faced a student, now a gunman. So that right there is dealing, obviously, specifically with the school to prison pipeline. I can continue going. I'm gonna give you a couple more tracks. I like doing this, so we good. This one right here was actually one of my first tracks that I ever wrote. Well, not that I ever wrote, but my bad. This is actually the track to my first music video ever. And this one I called Answers. Your idol is Warren Buffett, mine is Nasir Jones. Streets have a market, I ain't talking Dow Jones. And yet, before we're accustomed to tracking the trad lines, so to be honest, use different methods tracking their dead guys. Start growing, crops flowing, and I mean on both sides. So marijuana will be legal, free and thugs of most crimes, both to some degree, advance through illegal profits, whether politics or business, both become regal profits, perpetuating cycles that marauded throughout the years, by cash accountable for plenty bloodshed and tears. Want to talk finance happens when you paying the riz, be the pack jackass mule they use to plant their riz. Fact, the reality, they're closer than they appear. CIA, the Nicaragua smuggled drugs throughout the years. Now developers come in and buy homes that have been abandoned by broken people surrounded by graffiti and packs of beers. So Mr. Politician, tell me how you handle this. when the system you support is known as scandalous. Once at NYU to learn public admin and management, the problem is never knowledge, it was simply the establishment. So as I write this letter, and y'all count y'all cheddar, and I'm busy working my way out the student debt, keep building shiny tone medals while you add to your medals. It's clear you're all puppets. Who is your pedo when like Pinocchio? Lies aren't told by the nose, but something else getting stiff could be found under those boxes. Brief look at candidate Anthony Weiner publicly more than once, yo, flaunting his let the political figure be a black man, Latin or Afghan, laser in any dots, but not Pac-Man, not mining, but abstract how society subtracts, so they think it's subparts, that sequence of dub calls white black crap. Scared to stare at facts. 400, only 2 people black whack. I won't even mention Hispanic vanish soon as you say manage less a bodega or cartel running businesses outlandish. Plus, scandals ain't the only point of reference to lust. They lust money, lust power, lust stepping on us. Inseminate on the people when they go through with some bucks. Foundations of welfare that dig is deeper in rust. How about you work for some jobs? Makes him a boss, or director like the CEO in the country abroad. Seems your peripheral's not broad, though you love sex and abroads. Your own unqualified if they're wearing a bra. Outrageous, then claim that you'll save us over promise and no commitment. Then you won't engage us, endangers the system that claims it's revolution on pavements. Believe that you're doves, but ironically ravens. You're crazy in your veins with the reign of a king to embody everything that your people mean. But I lean on what's certain. This life is a sermon, and God's the only king in whom I'm undoubtedly certain. So, as I write this letter, when y'all count y'all cheddar, and I'm busy working my way out the student debt, keep building shiny tone medals while you add to your medals. If you're all puppets, then where's your pedal? We got answers. So that right there obviously is kind of a response to the system. Everything is set up and coordinated in such a way where they know what they're doing. You know, the powers that be and people that come up with policy and all this different stuff. But at the end of the day, we don't have to accept it. You know, we could work, you know, to change at least little things, again, like the dynamic in the classroom. And then, you know, throughout the process of time, America is going to diversify anyways. You know, America is tanning, as they say. It's in a couple of decades, it's going to be a minority majority. And it's just no way of going around that. You know what I'm saying? And so it's in the best interest of our country's future that we start focusing on inclusivity. We start focusing on how we can incorporate a lot more of the students' culture into the classroom, so that way everybody can be on the same page. We can assist each other in different ways. And at the end of the day, it just makes your job easier. Like, why wouldn't you want to give yourself an easier time, you know, in regards to like the work that you're trying to do and things of that nature. So I'm gonna do this, actually 2 more tracks. Excuse me. I'm gonna do 2 more tracks, and then that'll be it for the performance. My bad, the allergies keep kicking in. Yes, it's not good. All right. Was born out of pity. Wow, this is bad. Was born out of pity. Was born out of city where fools mounted Diddy and J. Yo, 50 cents got you a lot back in the day. Now, of course, you need banks. Catch a whiff of that, yeah, yo, you needed them pesos. Otherwise, Michael Preso. Fellas moving that peso rolled nice through the Bronx using bronze-colored pipes. Broken whips for the whip, crooks who call that a breakthrough. The code was immaculate gritty. Who we kidding? The lows, desperation conditions. They got you silly walking in the buildings and you smelling up the piss. Set of building prospects, building up a piff. Uptown, more like downtown. I was round frowns. Cops will come, you get locked down. If not from downtown, still hear the sound pound. New surround sound be like blow, blow. Hate it or love it. They won't make it. It's so flagrant. They left their aura and aroma, the hood of death has a fragrance. Hate it or love it. And I'm gonna shine. And I'm gonna shine it. I'm gonna grind it. Not get caught up in the system. Hate it or love it, the underdogs on top. And I'm gonna shine, homie, until my heart stop. Finish chasing my masters. Now I'm a master of the chase. Chase checks for the master years and not catching the case. Definition of gangster. No, I'm not taking the bait. Paying bail out the slam. I hustle without seeing the jakes. Cause if I didn't, that'd be the grave. Only way your brother ever catch a break. Hate it or love it. And now this last one right here is called Goat Talk. GOAT standing for greatest of all time. Now, we should all aspire to want to be the greatest in what we do, not just for the sake, obviously, of chasing clout or, you know, engrandosing ourselves, but for the sake of others. If we're not great, if we're not excellent, how can we expect others to be great and excellent, especially the students who are going to look up to us and pretty much idolize us to whatever extent if we do our jobs correctly. So this right here is called GOAT Talk, and that's just my goal, to be as great as I possibly can. Like I said, at the age of 27, I'm very proud of what I've been able to accomplish. I'm a professor. You know, I started at the age of 26 as a professor. I got my master's degree, first and only person in my whole family to have it. I survived different circumstances that, you know, easily could have just gone a completely different direction. And, you know, I'm still very passionate about representing my community and doing it through hip hop and things of that nature. So, you know, we just gonna see what's up, and hopefully my students, you know, take a similar route, if not greater, you know what I'm saying? Because the goal is for them to become better versions of ourselves, and that's how it's gotta be. Everybody in my ear like, damn, go ahead, goddamn, to leave my man. You've already done things and achieved life spanking to me with a decent to me right hand in the air, cause you care and you know I ain't never see you leave a man on the floor. I say yeah, cause at times I say man on the floor is the man who now stands in his spit in his flow. See, you ain't gotta understand it, cause it's man with the plan came to me and commanded that I be what's demanded. That's the lead being me, see the station commanding. Swear to God, never planned it. If for me, I would speed through this life till I rammed it. Sheep always sleep till the creep stick his fangs, and be so elite was in me, I was damaged. My jigger, I figure I'm bigger. Line figures wanna go and put a trigger wine if it's spilling out from the side. Out till I die, do anything just to see a spine shiver. Every day still I'm thinking I could crash. Looking at this path, seeing the greatest people fall. Learning how to crawl was curled up in the ball. You should think that I was trash, now I'm answering my call. When you just see me rolling, everybody gonna stop and then notice that I'm living these dreams out this nightmare called life. When I wake, I'm on notice. This beast that don't care, it don't fight fair. Even if injustice is right there. When I tweak, no, it's all from components. Opponents, place it ain't right. Either way, I keep the grind, I'm consistent. Try to take my life, I'm resistant. I'm a force, but of course, they don't like that. I ain't asked for permission. When I die, yo, I'm gonna die a legend. Nothing's gonna be a legend. Young goat in the making, you know that. Go hold that, stand there in reverence. Yeah. Yo, South by Southwest, it's been real. Thanks so much for the opportunity. Even though COVID-19 had to come through like a hating, you know, ex-girlfriend or something like that. I'm messing. But hopefully, you know, everybody's safe, everybody's doing well. You know, sending positive vibes, positive energy to all of y'all. If y'all have loved ones or people that are affected by this, if you've been affected by this, and hopefully, you know, we get back to the rhythm of things soon, and hopefully this can be something you could incorporate into your classrooms. If you want your students to continue to grow as young scholars and being educated and things of that nature, please include more, you know, cultural elements into the classroom, because this is what they know, this is what they are good at, and we are nobody to tell them that you're wrong for saying that this is your strength. That's all subjective, you know what I'm saying? As long as you learn, that's the key, and that's the most important thing in all of this. So, yo, one love, and have a great rest of your evening.